Hey, greetings, Talofa, Tofalava. Welcome everyone who's out there watching. My name is Leiataua, Dr. John Peterson, and you're watching the Alofa movement. Again, just want to say thanks to everybody who's been checking out the live streams, and I think we're over 100 views, which I'm really thankful for. And it's nice to see that people are able to make some time away from their busy lives, work, family, friends. Definitely are important things, and I'm so appreciative of people's interest in some of the topics that I've been talking about. Took a little break yesterday, wasn't really feeling it. Was kind of tired and didn't feel like being on camera yesterday, but got cleaned up, got a haircut, beard trim, and ready to go for today and today's topic, which is adaptation, innovation, and edge effects. So I think what I'll do is I'll just jump right in and talk a little bit about my experience and history with edge effects. For those of you that watched the video on how to start an LLC, I referenced the name of the firm that my father-in-law and I started in 2012. And the name of the firm is TE2, and it's an education and engineering consulting firm. I mentioned we haven't done a whole lot of work with that, but I've really been kind of firing that up a little bit more here in the last few months. I think, mention that TE2 stands for the edge effect. And so what I thought I would do today is talk a little bit about edge effects. And granted, my knowledge is limited. Science, environment is not really my field, but I'm very interested in edge effects and have been interested in the power of edge effects to spur on adaptation and create opportunities for greater innovation, whether it's in business, whether it's in education, or whether it's in ecology, or in healthcare, or in the field of medicine. So I hope that this is informational and can provide just some information for you in terms of how you might approach your everyday life, whether it's work, family, friends, whatever it might be. So as I mentioned, T2 stands for the edge effect. I first heard about edge effects, I think it was in 2011. I'm pretty sure it was right around the 2011-2012 timeframe, just before we created the business TE2. And what I found there isn't a lot of information about edge effects out on the internet, unless I'm not looking in the right spot, and that's very possible that there's more information available than I'm aware of. But I found the main source for defining and talking about edge effects on Wikipedia, of all places. And so what I'll do here is I'll read a little bit about the definition of edge effects, and then we can, talk a little bit about what that means and how that might be applicable to your work, your life, family, friends, whatever it might be. So again, this is from Wikipedia. I haven't seen any texts per se that talk about edge effects from an ecological perspective, but here's what the definition is. It says, in ecology, edge effects are changes in population or community structures that occur at the boundary of two or more habitats. Areas with small habitat fragments exhibit especially pronounced edge effects that may extend throughout the range. As the edge effects increase, the boundary habitat allows for greater biodiversity. The Wikipedia entry also talks about there being 6 different types of edge effects, and I'll read those off. The first is called inherent edge effect, where natural features stabilize the border location. The second is induced. Transient natural disturbances, examples would be fires or floods, or human-related activities, subject borders to successional changes over time. I imagine the forest fires that we're seeing out in California might be an example of that. And send positive thoughts to all the firefighters and everyone out there in California right now battling those fires. It's quite something. Right? I know that one of the fires is, I think the fire up in the middle part of the state is one of the largest, or if not the largest, fire in the history of California. The third type of edge effect is called narrow. One habitat abruptly ends and another begins. And that would be an agricultural field would be an example of a narrow edge effect. A wide edge effect, otherwise known as an ecotone, is constituted by a large distance that separates the borders of two clearly and purely definable habitats based on their physical conditions and vegetation. And in between there exists a large transition region. The fifth is called convoluted. The border is nonlinear. And then the sixth is called perforated. The border has gaps that host other habitats. So I'm trying to think of a great example or a good example of an edge effect or an edge effect region or zone. And I'm thinking specifically about the plains and the forest and the mountain regions of the western part of the United States and North America. I think this actually is a picture. This picture's from Pennsylvania, so it's not from the West, but in the picture from the Wikipedia entry or article, you can see that the edge effect is right about where my finger is. And that looks more like a linear, almost like a linear edge effect. One of the things that's really interesting about these edge effects, though, that I learned 6-7 years ago, is that the diversity of species that live within the region that constitutes the edge is very high. And in some cases, the species that thrive in those edges or in that particular edge or ecotone have the capacity to survive and thrive across the broad aspects of both habitats. So they're able to be successful in surviving and thriving and adapting to two different habitats, and not just within the edge necessarily, but throughout the broad range of both edges or both habitats. Some of the examples that they provide in the article from Wikipedia are white-tailed deer, mule deer, elk, cottontail rabbits, blue jays, and robins. And they also mention that some animals travel between multiple habitats, both habitats, while some edge species are restricted specifically to edges. Another thing that the article talks about is that for many of the species that live within these edges, they are not as susceptible to external threats to their survival. And because of the increased diversity of the species in the edge, they seem to be more successful in terms of thriving across time. It says animals traveling between communities can create travel lanes along borders, which in turn increases light, reaching plants along the lanes and promotes primary production. As more light reaches the plants, greater numbers and sizes can thrive. Increased primary production can increase numbers of herbivorous insects, followed by nesting birds, and so on up the trophic levels. So this is one last paragraph, and then I'll stop reading from the article. It says, when edges divide any natural ecosystem and the area outside the boundary is a disturbed or unnatural system, the natural ecosystem can be seriously affected for some distance in from the edge. In 1971, so evidently this goes back quite a ways, Odom wrote, the tendency for increased variety and diversity at community junctions is known as the edge effect. It is common knowledge that the density of songbirds is greater on estates, campuses, and similar settings as compared with tracts of uniform forest. In a forest where the adjacent land has been cut, creating an open forest boundary, sunlight and wind penetrate to a much greater extent, drying out the interior of the forest close to the edge and encouraging growth of opportunistic species there. Air temperature, vapor pressure deficit, soil moisture, light intensity, and levels of photosynthetically active radiation all change at edges. And then it goes on to talk a little bit about the Amazon rainforest and the Amazon basin being an area that is rich in edge effect. You may be wondering, why is he talking about edge effects? What does that have to do with leadership? What does that have to do with education? What does that have to do with organizations? It sounds like it's an interesting natural phenomenon concept. Well, one of the things that I found as an educator is that innovation and adaptation from a programmatic perspective seem to increase at the edges in which collaboration between two groups of people were working together. In education, it's long been believed that collaboration is a key, professional learning communities being an example. But I'd never really thought about collaboration from the perspective of edges and the effect that edges can have on spurring innovation and spurring adaptation. And so one of the things that I had tried to do as an educator was overlap multiple edges within a particular environment. And I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, I think a recent example would be the music project that's associated with the book, the EP album, Heart of the Matter. For those of you that have checked it out, the music has influences that are representative of multiple edges, relational edges, social edges that I've come across in the last 15 years as a musician. And so some of the influence of reggae music that you hear is edged up with what would be considered world music or island music or music from a warmer climate than what we necessarily see here in Minnesota. I know that my life has been enriched in terms of the music and being a musician by knowing people like Heshima Selassie, Raz C, Richard and Christopher Nicholson, Brian and Tatum, Steve, Miguel Gomez, all these different folks that I met, Jaisa, who was from Kenya. All of the different people that I've played music with over the years have influenced me at the edge of adaptation. And so from a relational perspective, just in my own personal life, I can say that the diversity of the experiences that I've had with the diversity of people that I've played music with is what helped to create a unique and different sound, I think, on the album. And so when you listen to the album, for those of you that have listened to it, you can hear influences of country music because some of the people that I played music with were people who really enjoyed country music. I'm not a huge country music fan. I do like some country music, truth be told, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But the influence and I think it would just be the influence of country music. You can hear on some of the album, the influence of pop. You can hear the influence of, obviously, roots reggae music, because some of the people that as I mentioned earlier, people that I've come to have relationships and friendships with are roots reggae musicians and roots reggae aficionados. So I think my point in everything that I said so far, which maybe hasn't been a lot or hasn't been clear, I don't know, but I think my point is that diversity is a positive thing, at least as it comes to ecology. And when you take a look at the species that live within an edge, they tend to thrive and be more successful in terms of passing on their genes as a result of the adaptation to two different environments rather than just one. Now, is there some tension and competition that exists in those edges between species? Yes, for sure there is. And I think the Wikipedia article talks a little bit about that. But what the article also says is that there's a niche effect that occurs within edge effect zones or ecotones in which competing species learn from one another how they can both survive and thrive within a particular niche. And I don't know that I can really make a strong corollary to, social groups or the healthcare field. Those are definitely healthcare is not my field and not something that I'm, really feeling like I'm at liberty to talk a lot about. But there is research out there. If you go and Google edge effects, you can see that the healthcare industry and healthcare professionals are starting to take a look at this phenomenon known as the edge effect, and using it to help improve the quality of the care that they provide folks. So that's edge effects, and I am a believer. I believe that edge effects are a place where adaptation and innovation can occur. If you don't believe me, though, you can always check out YouTube. YouTube has a lot of different videos, of course. And one of the videos that I found was from a place called the Aspen Institute. I think the Aspen Institute was created in the late 1940s after World War II. I don't know a whole lot about the Aspen Institute, so I'll have to do a little more research on that. I went to their website and checked out a little bit of it, but I'm not too familiar with it. I do know the head of, I think it was the head of national security or something, was recently on the Aspen Institute. I saw him on television at one point, and I think he was recently at the White House. So talking about elections and data security and that sort of thing. All right. Anyway, I don't want to go on a tangent on anything relating necessarily to that, but the Aspen Institute has a series of videos from their institutes, and one of the videos that I came across was about a 5-minute interview with the famous cellist Yo-Yo Ma. I don't know if you folks are aware of Yo-Yo Ma. I don't know a lot about Yo-Yo Ma. I mean, I've heard of the name, and I'm familiar with him as a cellist. I've heard he's pretty fantastic, one of the best cellists in the world. And I'm sure there are folks out there that know a lot about Yo-Yo Ma. But Yo-Yo Ma was talking about edge effects, of all things. And he was talking about edge effects within the context of creativity in music. I think one of the examples he gave in the video was that the greatest innovation that's ever occurred with respect to bow and stringed instruments came from a period of time where there were no secrets, and all of the major makers of those instruments lived very close to each other, and their families were close friends. And so I thought that was really interesting. If you get a chance, check out YouTube and just Google edge effects and Yo-Yo Ma, and you can check out. It's like a 5-minute video. It's not very long, and it talks about creativity and the importance of creativity, and the effect that edge effects can have on innovation and creativity in music. And that's definitely something that I've experienced myself, as I mentioned earlier, as a musician. Culturally, racially, ethnically, musically, my life has been enriched as a result of being next to and bringing my edge up to another person's edge who's different from me. Yeah, there's some tensions that occur sometimes. That goes without saying. We're human beings. But I think if we can work, at least for me, part of the struggle and part of the challenge is working through those tensions and finding a place of balance and harmony where you can have two different people or two different groups or two different species. In the case of, the environment and ecology, we're all the same species as humans, but where we can work together and coexist in peace and harmony. And both people, both groups, and in the case of environmental edge effects and ecotones, multiple species can be successful and thrive together, and maybe even thrive in ways that they wouldn't be able to thrive if they weren't living at the border or in the edge effect zone or the ecotone zone. So you can tell I'm not an expert in this area, but very fascinated by edge effects, and I hope that this has been informational for you. Lastly, I just wanted to say thanks for listening. I appreciate that. And if you have any other questions about edge effects, you can always look online, and you can always check things out through Google, the internet. I have not seen a lot of literature from a social perspective or an educational perspective on this subject or topic. Most of what I've seen online has been related to natural environments, healthcare, and music and creativity. So before I close out, we're at the 20-minute mark. I just wanted to let folks know that I heard back from the publisher on the book, and the original print of the books, or the run of the original print that they did, has sold out, which is great. I was very excited to hear that today. And because I was questioning why I only received 3 copies of the book, and I was supposed to receive 6 free copies of the book. I plan to give some of those, 5 of those books away to people who have been influential and important in helping with the creation of the book. But what they did mention is that there's a preview, and I'll show you the preview that they gave me, just a 2-pager. And right now they're running a special on the book. If you can see this at the bottom, it says special 30% discount offer. And there's a code at the bottom that you can enter in if you decide to buy the book. What's the discount? It's a 30% discount, which brings the price of the hardcover down to $59.50 and the ebook to $56.35. So it's a pretty significant decrease. I mean, 30%. The discount is valid until 8/30/2019. So until the end of this month. And it looks like there's a little bit of a cost for shipping and handling. In the United States, it's $5 for the first book, and then $1 for each additional book. You can order online through https://roman.com/Lexington. You just Google Roman and Littlefield Lexington Books if you want to. You can order toll free at 1-800-462-6420. You can send an email to orders@roman, ROWMAN.com. And you can also mail in a request to, I'm not going to give the address for that though. But what I'll do is hopefully I can figure out a way to post this to the Facebook website. And if you want, you can download this and use this form. One of the things I noticed is about the author, they did not put in Leiataua, which is a mistake. They should have had that in there, but c'est la vie, such is life. Everything is everything, as they say. So yeah, so check it out, 30% off until the end of August for those of you that are interested in pre-ordering the book. And as I mentioned in the last session or the last video or a couple videos ago, the book is available on August 16th. If you are wanting to check that out. I don't talk specifically in the book about edge effects, but I would say the entire experience of writing the book has been about different edge effects. And I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed the process as much as I did is that one of the primary things that came out of the process was an increased capacity to love family and friends, and to love the Most High, and also to love myself. And so that was very enriching, and I think it comes out in the book. So we're at the 23.5-minute mark. I want to say thank you, Faftai Leiataua, as usual, and thank you to Ainga family and friends for watching. My name is Leiataua Dr. John Peterson, and you just checked out episode or video number